I looked at the security footage of Quincy screaming at his mother's doorbell, his Italian loafers covered in Statesboro mud. It was a poetic sort of violence. 3 weeks ago, he had stood on a podium and sold my dignity for a cheap laugh and a round of applause. He thought he was marrying a passive checkbook, a silent partner in his rise to power. He didn't realize that the silence wasn't submission. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The crystal champagne flute tapped against the microphone, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the low hum of 300 conversations. It was the kind of sound that usually signaled a heartfelt thank you or a retirement announcement. My husband Quincy stood at the center of the dais, swaying just enough to suggest the bourbon had done its work, but not enough to alert the casual observer. He looked impeccable in his navy suit, the one I had picked out, the one I had paid for. But his smile was wrong. It was too wide, too sharp, like a dog baring its teeth before a bite. I froze, my hand hovering over my salad fork. I calculated the distance between my chair and the podium. 20 feet, too far to stop him. I glanced at my father, Alistair Winthrop, sitting 2 seats away. His face was a mask of granite, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the linen tablecloth. He knew. Somehow, he knew this was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quincy's voice boomed, magnified by the speakers, echoing off the high ceilings of the Winthrop Gala Hall. "If I could steal a moment of your time, I know we're here to celebrate 50 years of agricultural excellence, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about the real harvest." He paused for laughter. A few polite titters rippled through the room. I felt a cold bead of sweat slide down my spine. My stomach turned over, a physical knot of dread. Why was he doing this? We had practiced the protocol. Sit, smile, clap for my father. Do not speak unless spoken to. That was the deal. "You know," Quincy continued, his eyes scanning the room but sliding right over me, "marrying into the Winthrop family has been an education, a true education." He chuckled, a wet, heavy sound. "Take my beautiful wife, Alara. Stand up, honey." I didn't move. My legs felt like lead. The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the clink of silverware 3 tables over. "Oh, don't be shy," Quincy said, his voice dripping with that sickening, sugary tone he used when he wanted to belittle me in private. Now he was doing it in front of the entire Savannah business elite. "See, folks, Alara is a special creature. She's what I like to call ornamental, beautifully designed, expensive to maintain, but you wouldn't want to rely on her to, say, balance a checkbook or make a difficult decision." The silence in the room changed. It went from attentive to horrified. I stopped breathing. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told myself this was a joke. He was going to pivot. He was going to say, "But seriously, she's the rock of my life." I waited for the pivot. I prayed for the pivot. "And honestly," he went on, leaning casually against the podium, "it's a full-time job just keeping her happy. You have no idea the stress of managing a woman who thinks work is choosing which charity luncheon to attend." He laughed again, looking around for validation. "But hey, someone has to protect her from the real world, right? She's just so fragile. If I didn't handle the heavy lifting, the poor girl would probably crumble." He wasn't pivoting. He was doubling down. He was painting a portrait of me as a useless, vapid doll, and he was presenting himself as the weary, benevolent caretaker, the toxic benevolence. He wasn't calling me a bitch, he was calling me a burden he heroically carried. I looked down at my plate. The roasted beets looked like drops of blood on the white china. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that I had managed the entire renovation of our home, that I sat on 3 boards, that I had a degree in art history that he mocked daily. But my throat closed up. Shame is a physical paralytic. It locks your joints and steals your voice. To Alara, Quincy raised his glass, his eyes finally locking onto mine, glassy and cruel. The most expensive pet a man could ask for. The applause was scattered, confused. A few people clapped out of reflex, then stopped abruptly when they realized what they were doing. The sound of that sporadic applause was worse than silence. It was the sound of pity. I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I looked up, I would see the faces of my father's employees, the people I had known since I was a child. I would see the board members, the competitors, the wives who whispered behind their fans. They were all looking at me. I could feel their gazes like physical touch, hot and invasive. My internal monologue was a chaotic scream. Get up. You have to get up. If you stay sitting, you agree with him. If you run, you look guilty. If you cry, you're the fragile girl he described. I tried to inhale, but my corset felt like it had shrunk 3 sizes. The air in the ballroom was thick with expensive perfume and roast beef and the stench of my own humiliation. I pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood against the parquet floor sounded like a gunshot. I stood up. My knees shook so violently I had to grab the edge of the table to steady myself. Quincy was still smiling up at the podium, taking a sip of his champagne, watching me with that smug, satisfied look. He had won. He had asserted dominance in the most public arena possible. I turned to the exit. I needed air. I needed to be anywhere but here. I started to walk, focusing on the exit sign, a glowing red beacon of salvation. Keep your head up, I told myself. Do not run. Walk. Walk like a Winthrop. I made it 3 steps before disaster struck. The hem of my emerald gown, the one Quincy had insisted I wear because it showed off the goods, caught on the leg of a chair. I tugged. It didn't give. Panic flared, hot and bright. No, please, God, no, not this. I tugged again, harder. The fabric ripped. A loud, tearing sound that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet of the room. I stumbled, nearly falling, catching myself on the shoulder of a man sitting at table 4. It was Mr. Henderson, my father's oldest supplier. "Careful now, Miss Alara," he whispered, his voice thick with embarrassment for me. I looked at him, and I saw it in his eyes. He believed Quincy. He saw a clumsy, fragile woman who couldn't even walk across a room without disaster. The narrative had already set like concrete. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." I freed my dress, leaving a shred of green silk behind on the chair leg, and fled. I didn't walk like a Winthrop. I ran like a wounded animal. I burst through the double doors into the lobby, the cool air hitting my flushed face, but the heat of the shame didn't dissipate. It burned under my skin, radioactive. I made it to the lobby's grand staircase before my legs gave out. I sank onto the second step, burying my face in my hands, trying to breathe, trying to stop the room from spinning. I could hear the muffled sounds of the gala behind the closed doors, the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses resuming. The world was moving on, digesting the spectacle I had just provided. "Alara." The voice was low, steel wrapped in velvet. I looked up. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was Garrison Vance. He was my father's personal attorney, the company's fixer, a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car and had eyes that missed absolutely nothing. I had known Garrison for years, but only from a distance, the scary man in the corner of my father's office who made problems disappear. "Garrison," I choked out, wiping a tear from my cheek before it could ruin my makeup. I need to call an Uber. I can't find my phone." He didn't offer me a tissue. He didn't offer me pity. He walked up 2 steps until he was eye level with me. "You are not calling an Uber," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "And you are not going back in there." "I have to find Quincy," I said, the programming of 3 years of marriage kicking in automatically. "He's drunk. He shouldn't drive. I need to explain to him that—" "Alara, stop." Garrison cut me off. He reached out and took my elbow. His grip was firm, grounding. Quincy is not your problem tonight. He just made himself a liability, and liabilities get cut." "I don't understand," I stammered. My brain was foggy, struggling to process the shift from social disaster to whatever this was. "Did my father send you?" "Your father is currently inside ensuring that Quincy doesn't get near a microphone again," Garrison said, guiding me down the stairs. "He signaled me the moment your husband stood up. We are leaving." "But my purse," I protested weakly. "My house keys." "You won't need them," Garrison said. He was moving me toward the main entrance now, his body acting as a shield between me and the few stragglers in the lobby. "We have everything you need. The car is out front." I let him lead me. I felt like a child, or a prisoner, or both. Part of me wanted to fight, to run back inside and scream at Quincy, to demand an apology, but a larger part of me, the part that had been slowly beaten down over months of subtle insults and gaslighting, was just relieved to have someone else take the wheel. We stepped out into the humid Savannah night. A black town car was idling at the curb. Not a limo, nothing conspicuous, just a heavy, armored-looking sedan. Garrison opened the back door for me. "Get in," he said. "Where are we going?" I asked, pausing with one foot inside. "Home? Quincy will be furious if I'm not there when he gets back." Garrison looked at me, and for a second the professional mask slipped. I saw something else. Anger? Pity? "We are not going to your house, Alara," he said softly. "You don't live there anymore." The door slammed shut, sealing me inside the silent, leather-scented cocoon of the car. Garrison slid into the driver's seat. I heard the distinct thunk-thunk of the locks engaging. It sounded heavier than normal central locking. "What do you mean I don't live there anymore?" I leaned forward, gripping the back of his seat. Panic began to rise again, sharper this time. "Garrison, you can't just kidnap me. I have a life. I have a husband." "You have a parasite," Garrison said, pulling the car away from the curb. He didn't look at me in the rearview mirror. He was scanning the road, driving with a precision that felt military. "And tonight, the host body is rejecting it." "You're talking about him like he's a disease," I snapped. "He's my husband. He made a bad toast. He's drunk. People make mistakes." Why was I defending him? I hated myself for it. 10 minutes ago, he had flayed me alive. But the habit of defending him was so ingrained, it was muscle memory. I had spent 3 years explaining away his sharp edges, his jokes, his spending. He's just stressed. He's ambitious. You don't understand the pressure he's under. "That wasn't a mistake, Alara," Garrison said, his voice calm, factual. "That was a declaration of intent. He thinks he's untouchable. He thinks you're so broken you'll take that abuse and thank him for the attention." I slumped back against the seat. He loves me, in his own way." "He loves your trust fund," Garrison corrected, "and he loves the access you give him to your father's network. But tonight, he overplayed his hand." We turned onto a road I recognized, but it wasn't the way to my house in the historic district. It was the road north, toward the marshlands, toward the gated estate where I grew up. "Take me home, Garrison," I said, trying to summon the authority of a vice president's daughter. "I need to talk to him." "No," Garrison said. "If you go home tonight, he will manipulate you. He will cry. He will blame the alcohol. He will tell you that you're overreacting, that you have no sense of humor. And by morning, you will be apologizing to him." The accuracy of his prediction hit me like a physical blow. I had lived that exact scenario a dozen times. The "I was just joking" defense, the "you're so sensitive" counterattack. "I hate that you're right," I whispered. "I'm paid to be right," Garrison said, "and right now my instructions are to deliver you to a secure location until the asset freeze is complete." "Asset freeze?" I sat up straight. "What are you talking about?" "We'll explain everything when we get to the estate," Garrison said. "Just know this. The man you married doesn't exist. He's a construct, and tonight we're taking the sledgehammer to the foundation." I looked out the window. The Spanish moss hanging from the oaks looked like gray ghosts in the headlights. I felt a strange sense of vertigo. I was moving, but I wasn't going anywhere I chose. I was being rescued, but it felt remarkably like being captured. The iron gates of the Winthrop estate swung open as we approached, the security cameras blinking their red eyes in the darkness. We drove up the long, winding driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires. The house loomed ahead, a sprawling colonial mansion that had always felt more like a museum than a home. Garrison parked in front of the portico. The front door opened before I could even reach for the handle. My mother, Beatrice Winthrop, stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her usual impeccable hosting attire. She was in a silk robe, her hair pulled back, holding a glass of amber liquid that I suspected wasn't tea. I got out of the car. My legs were stiff. The torn hem of my dress dragged on the gravel. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. She didn't run to me. Winthrops don't run. She walked down the steps, her face set in a grim line. She looked me up and down, noting the torn dress, the ruined makeup. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "I suppose that's one way to make an exit." "He humiliated me," I said, the tears finally spilling over, in front of everyone. "He humiliated himself," Beatrice corrected sharply. She reached out and pulled me into a hug. It wasn't a soft, maternal embrace. It was fierce, rigid. She smelled of lavender and expensive scotch. "You, my dear, were just the collateral damage. But we are done with collateral damage." She pulled back and looked at me. "Come inside. Garrison needs to brief you, and you need a drink." "I don't drink," I said automatically. Quincy didn't like it when I drank. He said it made me sloppy. "Tonight," my mother said, steering me toward the door, "you drink, because what you are about to hear requires a sedative." We walked into the foyer. It was silent, vast, and imposing. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the hallway. It felt like stepping back in time, back to when I was a teenager living under their rules. But this time, the safety felt different. It felt necessary. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He's in the study," Beatrice said, "with the file." "The file?" "The Quincy file," Garrison said from behind me, locking the front door. "We've been building it for 6 months." I stopped walking. 6 months? You've been investigating my husband for 6 months? "We've been investigating a con artist for 6 months, Beatrice said. "It just so happens he's currently sharing your bed." The study was exactly as I remembered it. Walls lined with mahogany bookshelves, the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco, and the massive oak desk that looked like a fortress. My father, Alistair, sat behind it. He was still in his tuxedo, tie undone, looking every one of his 65 years. "Sit down, Ilara," he said, gesturing to the leather wingback chair opposite him. I sat. Garrison took the chair next to me. My mother stood by the fireplace sipping her drink, watching like a sentinel. Alistair pushed a thick manila folder across the desk. It was labeled simply, "Subject, Kay Chase." "What is this?" I asked, terrified to open it. "This," Alistair said, "is the reason you are not going home tonight. Garrison, walk her through it." Garrison leaned forward, opening the folder. The first page was a copy of the prenuptial agreement I had signed 3 years ago. "You remember signing this?" Garrison asked. "Of course," I said. "Standard asset protection. Dad insisted." "Read Clause 14, Section B," Garrison said, tapping a paragraph highlighted in yellow. I squinted at the legal text. "In the event of gross reputational harm caused by public defamation or proven financial malfeasance exceeding $10,000, the behavior stipulation is triggered, rendering all marital asset claims null and void." I looked up. "I don't understand." "It means," Garrison said, "that the little speech he gave tonight, that was gross reputational harm. It was public, it was defamatory, and we have it on 4K video. So, I can divorce him? It means you can divorce him and he gets nothing, Alistair said, his voice hard. No alimony, no claim on the house, no slice of the trust fund he's been eyeing like a hungry wolf. But there's a catch, Garrison said, his tone dropping. The behavior stipulation requires 2 pillars of proof. We have the defamation. That happened tonight. But to make it airtight, to make sure he doesn't drag this out in court for 5 years, we need the second pillar, the financial malfeasance. He spends a lot, I said, but it's mostly on clothes, dinners. It's not clothes, Ilara, Garrison said. He flipped the page. It was a printout of a bank transfer. He's been moving money, large sums, but he's smart. He's using a shell structure I can't crack from the outside without triggering alerts that would tip him off. He's hiding it. So how do we prove it? We need the source, Garrison said. We know he keeps a physical ledger, a black notebook, old school. He doesn't trust the cloud. I froze. The black moleskin, I whispered. He keeps it in his desk. He told me it was his idea journal for the firm. That's not an idea journal, Alistair said. That is a log of every dollar he's siphoned off your joint accounts and funneled into his gambling debts. Gambling? I felt the room tilt. Quincy doesn't gamble. Quincy only gambles, Garrison corrected. He's down nearly $40,000 this year alone, and he's paying it with your money. I felt sick, physically ill. The dinners he couldn't afford, the way he checked his phone constantly during sports games, the investments that never seemed to pay out. We need that book, Garrison said, looking me dead in the eye. If we have that book, we have the second pillar. We can lock him out of the accounts, seize the house, and serve him with papers before he even knows he's been hit. But we can't get a warrant fast enough. If he realizes what happened tonight, if he sobers up and thinks about the liability, he will destroy that book. So what do we do? I asked. Garrison didn't answer. He just looked at me. No, I said, shaking my head. You want me to go back there? He's not there, Garrison said. Our tracker shows his phone is currently at a bar on River Street. He's celebrating his victory at the Gala. You have a window, maybe 2 hours. You want me to break into my own house, I said. It's not breaking in if it's your house, Alistair said gently. But Ilara, you have to do this. We can't do it for you. If I send security, it's theft. If you do it, it's a wife retrieving property from her marital home. I looked at the folder. I looked at the image of the bank transfer. $5,000. Withdrawn on my birthday. The day he told me he couldn't afford a gift because things were tight at the firm. Internal rage, cold and sharp, replaced the nausea. He had lied, he had stolen, and he had laughed about it on a stage. Give me the car keys, I said to Garrison. I'll drive you, Garrison said. No, I stood up. The fear was still there, but it was being fueled by something hotter. I need to do this. I need to see it for myself. I need to know that I'm not crazy. Alistair looked at Garrison, then nodded. Go, my father said. Bring us the book, and then we burn him down. I gripped the steering wheel of Garrison's sedan, my knuckles turning white against the leather. The road to Ardsley Park was familiar. I had driven it 1,000 times, but tonight it felt like navigating a foreign country during a ceasefire. Every shadow looked like a trap. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror made my heart hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Whoa. I parked 3 houses down from our Victorian 2-story. It felt ridiculous, parking a block away from a home where my name was on the deed, but Garrison's warning echoed in my head. You are not a wife tonight. You are an operative. I killed the engine. The silence of the neighborhood rushed in, heavy and judgmental. The street lamps cast long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawns. I checked my phone. It was 2 a.m. Quincy was supposed to be at the bar on River Street, drowning his sorrows and likely buying rounds for strangers he wanted to impress. But what if he wasn't? What if he had decided to come home early to rehearse his apology? I forced myself to open the car door. The humid air stuck to my skin. I walked quickly, staying close to the hedge line, my heels clicking softly on the pavement. I wanted to take them off, to run barefoot like a thief, but some absurd remnant of propriety stopped me. "Vice presidents' daughters don't skulk," my mother's voice whispered in my ear. "Well, they don't usually break into their own homes either," I shot back. I reached the front porch. The house looked dark, dormant. I slid my key into the lock, my hand trembling so badly I scratched the brass plate. "Calm down. Just breathe." I turned the key. The tumblers clicked, a sound that used to mean safety, rest, home. Now it sounded like the cocking of a gun. I pushed the door open and stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first. Sandalwood and stale bourbon. Quincy's scent. It was everywhere, seeping into the curtains, the rug, the air itself. I closed the door behind me and locked it, engaging the deadbolt. Why did I do that? Was I locking him out or locking myself in? I stood in the dark foyer, listening. The house groaned, the settling of timber that I usually ignored. Tonight, every creak sounded like a footstep. I took a step toward the study, and a sudden loud clatter from the kitchen made me jump so hard I nearly bit my tongue. I froze, crouching instinctively, my heart slamming against my throat. He's here. Oh God, he's here. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Silence returned, thick and oppressive. It was the ice maker, just the refrigerator dropping a new batch of ice. I let out a breath that was more of a sob. I was terrified of my own appliances. I looked around the living room, illuminated only by the street lamp filtering through the sheer drapes. I saw the silhouette of the sofa we had bought together, the expensive abstract painting he insisted we needed to show sophistication. It wasn't my home. It was a stage set for his performance, and I was just a prop he had left in the wings. I wasn't safe here. I was trespassing in his ego. "Move," I whispered to myself. "Get the book." "Get out." I navigated to his study without turning on the lights, guiding myself by memory and the faint glow of the moonlight. The study was his sanctuary. He didn't like me going in there. "I deal with sensitive client privilege, Ilara," he would say, closing the door in my face. "It's for your own legal protection." I walked around the massive oak desk. I felt for the top drawer, the one where he kept the black moleskin. Locked. Of course it was locked. I tugged on the handle. It didn't budge. "Damn it," I hissed. I felt under the lip of the desk for a key. Nothing. I checked the pen cup. Nothing. I opened the top unlocked drawer and felt around the back. Nothing. Think, Ilara. Think. He wouldn't keep the key on his person. He lost things constantly. It had to be here. I checked the bookshelves. I lifted the corner of the rug. I ran my hands along the top of the door frame. Dust, but no key. Panic began to curdle into anger. He had locked me out of my own money, my own life, and now this stupid piece of furniture was standing between me and my freedom. "Fine," I said. "We do this the hard way." I looked around for a tool. A letter opener? Too flimsy. I needed leverage. My eyes landed on the shelf behind the desk. There, gleaming in the shadows, was his Rising Star Award from the Chamber of Commerce, a heavy, jagged piece of crystal on a marble base. I grabbed it. It was heavier than I expected, a solid 3 pounds of self-congratulation. I positioned the sharp edge of the marble base against the lock mechanism of the drawer. I took a breath. "Sorry, mahogany." I slammed the award into the wood. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house. I winced, waiting for sirens, for shouting. Silence. I looked at the drawer. The wood around the lock was splintered, but it was still holding. "I hate you," I grunted, swinging the award again and again. The physical exertion felt good. It was the first time in 3 years I was actually fighting back. On the 4th strike, The wood gave way. The lock mechanism crumbled. I yanked the drawer open, sending splinters flying onto the carpet. I reached into the dark cavern of the drawer, my fingers expecting the smooth, cool leather of the notebook. They met. Nothing. I frowned, feeling around. I pulled out a stack of papers, old receipts, business cards. I shoved them aside. I felt all the way to the back. The notebook was gone. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." My stomach dropped through the floor. Had Garrison been wrong? Had Quincy moved it? Then my hand brushed against something cold and glass. I pulled it out. It was an iPad, not the family one we kept in the kitchen for recipes, a sleek black iPad Pro I had never seen before. I pressed the home button. The screen flared to life, blindingly bright in the dark room. Enter passcode. 6 digits. I stared at the blinking cursor. Garrison needed the ledger, but if the ledger was gone, this device had to be the backup. It had to be where he was making the trades. I tried our anniversary, 10/14/22. Incorrect passcode. I wiped my sweaty palms on my dress. Okay, think like Quincy, narcissist, egomaniac. I tried his birthday, 031980. Incorrect passcode. "Come on," I pleaded. The screen mocked me. "Try again in 1 minute," appeared after the next failed attempt, my own birthday. I stood there in the dark, staring at the countdown, my heart racing. 60 seconds of pure terror. What mattered to him? What was the most important thing in the world to Quincy Chase? Not me, not his mother, his image, his success. I remembered the day he got the offer letter from the firm. He had framed it. He had toasted it every year. He called it his day of ascension. November 12th, 2018. The timer hit 0. My fingers hovered over the glass. 111218. The screen unlocked. I didn't exhale. I didn't celebrate. I tapped the screen, my fingers flying. No social media apps, no email on the home screen. Just a folder labeled Utilities. I opened it. It wasn't a calculator or a weather app. It was a graveyard of our future. BetMGM, DraftKings, PokerStars, and a banking app I didn't recognize. An offshore account. I opened the poker app first. It logged in automatically. Of course, he saved the password. The balance at the top of the screen made me gag. Negative $4,200. I clicked on Transaction History. Deposit $5,000. Date, October 4th. Deposit $2,000. Date, October 10th. Deposit $8,000. Date, October 15th. I pulled out my own phone, my hands shaking so hard the image on the screen blurred. I had to steady my hand against the desk. Click. I took a photo. Click. Another one. I switched to the offshore banking app. It required a fingerprint, but then I saw the recent transfers notification still lingering in the notification center he hadn't cleared. Transfer from joint savings, $5,000. Transfer from emergency fund, $3,000. He wasn't just gambling. He was draining us dry to feed a beast that could never be full. He was systematically dismantling the safety net my father had helped me build, all while lecturing me about my spending on organic groceries. I took photos of everything, the notifications, the account numbers, the usernames. "I have you," I whispered. "I have you, you son of a bitch." A flash of light swept across the ceiling. I froze. Headlights, turning into the driveway. I dropped to the floor behind the desk, clutching the iPad and my phone to my chest. I heard the distinct heavy purr of Quincy's Audi. The engine cut. The car door slammed. He was home. 2 hours early. Damn it, I breathed. I scrambled to my feet, shoving the iPad into my purse. I couldn't go out the front. He was walking up the path. I heard his keys jingle. The lock turned. "Ilara?" His voice was muffled by the door, but it was loud, slurred, angry. "Why is the deadbolt on?" I looked around the study. There was no other exit. I had to get to the kitchen, the back door. I sprinted out of the study, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. "Ilara!" he shouted, banging on the door. "Open this damn door! I know you're in there!" He hadn't used his key on the deadbolt yet. He was too drunk to coordinate 2 keys. That gave me seconds. I ran into the kitchen. I fumbled with the lock on the back door. It was stiff. Clack. The front door opened. "Ilara!" He was inside. "Where are you? I saw the car down the street. You think you can hide?" I shoved the back door open and slipped out into the humid night air. I closed it softly, praying the latch wouldn't click loudly. Click. Inside, I heard him stumble into the kitchen. "Ilara?" I didn't wait. I bolted across the backyard, vaulting over the low garden fence, tearing my dress again, not caring. I ran through the neighbor's yard, dodging a sprinkler, my lungs burning. I looped around the block, keeping to the shadows until I reached Garrison's car. I threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely find the ignition button. I started the car, leaving the lights off, and pulled away from the curb just as I saw the lights in our house flick on, one by one, like eyes opening in the dark. I drove back to the Winthrop estate in a trance, the adrenaline from the break-in slowly curdling into a shivering exhaustion. The steering wheel felt foreign in my hands, slippery with sweat. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Quincy's Audi tearing down the dark highway after me, high beams flashing like accusations. But the road behind me remained empty, a long stretch of asphalt swallowed by the Georgia night. I walked into the library and threw the iPad onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud that sounded like a gavel coming down. "I didn't get the book," I said, my voice hoarse. "He moved it, or he burned it." Garrison didn't flinch. He just reached for the device. My father, Alistair, looked up from his armchair, his face gray with fatigue. "But I got this," I added, pointing a shaking finger at the screen, "and I took photos of everything on my phone, just in case he remotely wipes it." Garrison woke the screen. He swiped through the photos I had taken, his eyes narrowing. I watched him, trying to read the verdict in the set of his jaw. Every second of silence felt like an hour. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the trembling. I felt dirty. I had just burgled my own husband. I was a criminal in a cocktail dress. "Well?" Alistair asked. "It's better than the book," Garrison said softly. "The book is just handwriting. This is digital footprints, timestamps, IP addresses." He turned the screen toward my father. "Look at this, Alistair. Poker stars, DraftKings, an offshore account in the Caymans labeled consulting fees that has incoming transfers from the joint marital savings." "How much?" Alistair asked. "Just from a quick glance at the withdrawal history?" Garrison did a mental calculation. In the last 6 months, he's moved about $22,000 out of the marriage and into the ether. $22,000. I sank onto the sofa. I thought about the time I wanted to replace the dishwasher because it was leaking, and Quincy had told me we needed to tighten our belts. He had made me wash dishes by hand for 3 weeks, standing over me, drying the plates, telling me it was a good exercise in humility. He wasn't teaching me humility. He was saving money for a buy-in. "That's enough," Garrison said, closing the iPad case. "That satisfies the financial malfeasance clause. We can file." "Do it," I whispered. "Burn him." My phone buzzed against my thigh, a violent, angry insect. I jumped, my heart slamming into my throat. I knew who it was. I didn't want to look. I wanted to throw the phone into the fireplace. "Look at it," Garrison commanded. "Do not reply, but we need to know his narrative." I pulled the phone out. The screen lit up with Quincy's name. It wasn't a rage text. It wasn't a string of expletives. I read the message aloud, my voice trembling. "Ilara, honey, where are you? I came home and the back door was open. I'm so worried. You seemed hysterical at the gala. Please tell me you're safe. I just want to take care of you." I stared at the words. Hysterical. Safe. take care of you. He's rewriting reality, I said, feeling a wave of nausea. He's not mad I broke in. He's pretending I had a mental breakdown and wandered off. Classic containment strategy, Garrison noted, writing something on his notepad. If he frames you as unstable, your testimony about the money looks like paranoia. He's building a defense for the social court. Another message popped up immediately. I'm not mad about the scene you caused tonight. I know you've been under a lot of stress lately. We can fix this. Just come home so I can give you your medicine. My medicine? I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. I don't take medicine. I take vitamins. He's establishing a paper trail, Alistair said, his voice cold. He's planting evidence of instability in the text history. If this goes to court, he'll say, "Look, Your Honor, I was begging her to take her medication." I looked at the phone. It felt toxic in my hand. He was weaponizing his concern. Every "I love you" was a shackle. Every "I'm worried" was a threat. "Block him," I said, my thumb hovering over the button. "No," Garrison stopped me. "Let him talk. Every lie he types is a nail in his coffin. Just don't answer. Silence is the one thing a narcissist can't handle. It makes them sloppy." The next morning, the sun rose over the marsh, oblivious to the fact that my life had imploded. I sat on the terrace, drinking black coffee that tasted like battery acid. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Quincy's face at the podium, smiling as he called me a pet. Garrison came out carrying a fresh file. He looked like he hadn't slept either, but on him, exhaustion just looked like intensity. "We need to discuss the timeline," he said, sitting opposite me. "We file the asset freeze on Monday morning, but there's something else you need to know before we proceed." "What else could there possibly be?" I asked. "He steals money. He emotionally abuses me. He has a secret iPad." "He has a secret past," Garrison said. He slid a single sheet of paper across the glass table. It was a marriage certificate, dated 12 years ago. Groom, Quincy Alexander Chase. Bride, Lana Marie Dubois. I stared at the names. The letters swam before my eyes. "He told me I was his first wife," I said. The words felt hollow. "He told me he waited until he was 35 because he was waiting for the one." "He lied," Garrison said. "He was married for 2 years in Charleston. It ended in a quiet divorce, sealed records. We had to dig deep to find it." "Why seal the records?" "Usually," Garrison leaned back, "to hide something embarrassing or criminal." I looked at the name, Lana Dubois. She was real. She had stood where I stood. She had probably heard the same speeches about being fragile, about needing his protection. "I need to talk to her," I said. "Bad idea." Garrison shook his head. "She's a civilian. We don't want to spook her. I can send an investigator to interview her." "No." I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone. "No investigators. No lawyers. If I send a suit, she'll clam up. She needs to see me. She needs to see the damage." "Ilara, you are not in a state to drive to Charleston," Alistair said from the doorway. "I am exactly in the state to drive to Charleston," I snapped. Then I softened. "Dad, please, I need to know. I need to know I'm not the only one who fell for it. I need to know I'm not stupid." Alistair looked at Garrison. Garrison sighed and handed me a set of keys. "Take the SUV," Garrison said. "It has better safety features. And Ilara, if she tells you to leave, you leave." The drive north on Highway 17 was a 2-hour tunnel of gray asphalt and green pines. I turned the radio off. I couldn't handle music. I couldn't handle lyrics about love or heartbreak. I just needed the hum of the tires. About 40 miles outside of Charleston, a yellow light pinged on the dashboard. Tire pressure low, rear left. My chest tightened. Panic, immediate and suffocating, washed over me. Call Quincy. That was the reflex. Call Quincy, he handles the cars. He handles the maintenance. I don't know what to do. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over his contact. Then I remembered. He wasn't my husband. He was my adversary. Calling him would be surrendering. "You are a 32-year-old woman," I said aloud to the empty car. "You can put air in a tire." I pulled into a grimy gas station. I got out. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I stared at the air pump. It looked complicated, dirty. I had never touched one in my life. Quincy always said, "Don't touch that, Alara, you'll get filth on your dress." I found a quarter in the cup holder. I fed the machine. The compressor roared to life, startling me. I crouched down by the tire, uncapping the valve stem. I hissed as the air escaped. I shoved the nozzle on. The gauge popped out. I didn't know what the number meant. 32? 35? I checked the sticker on the door frame. 35 psi. I filled it. I checked. I filled it again. Grease smeared onto my hand, a black streak across my palm. I looked at it. It was ugly. It was dirty. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I wiped my hand on my jeans, designer jeans I had bought to please Quincy, and got back in the car. The yellow light turned off. I didn't need him. I had never needed him. He had just convinced me that I did. Lana agreed to meet me at a small bakery in the French Quarter. She didn't sound surprised when I called. She just sounded tired. I arrived 10 minutes early. I checked my reflection in the bakery window. I looked haunted. Dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a severe bun. I wondered what she would look like. Was she broken? Was she bitter? When Lana walked in, she wasn't what I expected. She was radiant. She wore a tailored blazer and moved with a confidence that took up space. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a CEO. She spotted me instantly. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She walked over and slid into the booth opposite me. "Ilara," she said. Her voice was warm, grounded. "Lana," I said, "thank you for meeting me. I know this is weird." "It's not weird," she said, signaling the waiter. "It's inevitable. I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. I just didn't know what your name would be." "He told me he was never married," I blurted out. I needed to get it out of the way. "He lied." "Quincy breathes lies like air," Lana said calmly. "Did he do the toast?" I froze. "The toast?" "The she's so fragile toast," Lana said, picking up a menu. "The one where he tells the room how hard he works to keep you upright? Usually happens about 2 or 3 years in, right when he starts moving the money." My mouth fell open. "The Gala. Last night." Lana nodded slowly. "With me, it was my father's retirement party. He stood up and told 200 people that I couldn't balance a checkbook and that he was the saint keeping me out of bankruptcy. I thought it was just me," I whispered. Tears pricked my eyes. "I thought I was the problem." "That's the design, honey." Lana reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her grip was strong. "He breaks your confidence first. He makes you feel small, stupid, useless. So when he starts stealing, you don't trust yourself enough to question him." We sat there for 2 hours. My coffee went cold. I didn't care. Lana laid it all out. It was like reading a script of my own life. "He starts with the small things," she said. "He criticizes your spending. Do we really need the expensive brand? Then he takes over the bills. 'Don't worry your pretty head about it, babe. I've got it.' Then the credit cards start maxing out." "He has a gambling problem," I said. "I found the apps." "He has an image problem," Lana corrected. "The gambling is just how he tries to fund the lifestyle he thinks he deserves. With me, it was stocks, day trading. He lost $40,000 of my inheritance in 3 months playing the market." "40,000, I repeated. "He's down 20 with me." "He's getting slower," Lana mused. "Or maybe you were harder to crack." "He made me sign a prenup," I said. "A behavioral one." Lana's eyes widened. She actually laughed. "Oh, the arrogance. He tried that with me, but my dad laughed him out of the room. He actually signed a behavioral contract with you? Yes. If he causes reputational harm or steals money, he gets nothing. Lana leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Alara, do you realize what you have? You have the weapon I never had. I had to pay him off to leave. I had to write a check for $10,000 just to get him to sign the divorce papers because I was so desperate to be free. I don't want to pay him, I said, my voice hardening. I want to destroy him. Good, Lana said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. My lawyer. She's retired now, but for this, she'll come back. And I will write whatever affidavit you need. I will testify. I will walk into that courtroom and tell the judge exactly what he did to me. Why? I asked. Why help me? You got out. Because he's a predator, Lana said, her face serious now. And because when I left him, I wished someone had warned me. I can't change the past, Alara, but I can certainly help you burn his future to the ground. I looked at her. I saw myself in 10 years, strong, free, unbroken. Let's do it, I said. The drive back to Savannah felt different. I wasn't fleeing anymore. I was advancing. The steering wheel didn't feel slippery. It felt like a weapon. I called Garrison when I hit the city limits. I met her, I said the moment he picked up. She told me everything. The pattern is identical. The toast, the gaslighting, the fragile narrative. She's in. Did she agree to the affidavit? Garrison's voice was crisp, professional, but I could hear the relief. She's sending it to your office within the hour, and she's willing to testify. That's the nail in the coffin, Alara. With the behavioral clause, the financial theft, and a pattern of behavior established by a prior spouse, we have a nuclear case. Good, I said, merging onto Bay Street, because I'm going to the bank. Wait, Garrison cautioned. I can have a courier deliver the freeze order. No, I said. Couriers take hours. Papers get lost in inter-office mail. I want to see the teller type the code. I want to know for a fact that when he tries to buy his next round of drinks, the card declines. Alara, if you go in there, you might run into bureaucratic resistance. Banks don't like getting in the middle of domestic disputes. Then I'll make them like it even less, I said, and hung up. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The bun was messy, my eyes were tired, but there was a hardness in my jaw that I hadn't seen since college. Quincy had spent 3 years trying to sand down my edges, trying to make me soft and pliable. He forgot that underneath the polish, I was Alistair Winthrop's daughter, and Winthrops don't get mad. We get results. The bank branch on Abercorn Street was cool and smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I walked straight to the customer service desk. The woman behind the counter, whose name tag read Brenda, looked up with a practiced, weary smile. How can I help you today? I need to freeze a joint account immediately, I said, placing my ID and the account number on the desk. And I need to remove my name from the authorization list for the attached credit line. Brenda typed slowly, agonizingly slowly. I see the account here. Mr. and Mrs. Chase. Is Mr. Chase with you today? No, I said. He is not. Well, for a joint account, we typically require both parties to be present to close it or make significant changes, Brenda said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone that bureaucrats use when they're about to deny you something. It's for your protection. It's not for my protection, I said, leaning forward. My husband is currently draining this account to fund illegal gambling activities. If you do not freeze it, you are facilitating fraud. Brenda blinked. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but policy states... I don't care about policy, I cut her off. My voice was rising. I could feel the eyes of the other customers on me. The old Alara would have apologized and shrunk away. The old Alara would have been terrified of being that woman. But the old Alara was broke and humiliated. I have a notarized affidavit of financial malfeasance. I said, pulling the papers Garrison had emailed me out of my bag. I slammed them on the counter. I have photographic evidence of transfers to offshore accounts, and I have a lawyer on speed dial who specializes in banking negligence. So, Brenda, you have two choices. You can call your manager right now, or you can explain to your regional director why you let a customer lose another $5,000 after being explicitly warned. Brenda stared at me. She looked at the papers. She looked at the line of people behind me. "One moment," she whispered. She picked up the phone. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, refusing to fidget. I was shaking, but I locked my knees so it wouldn't show. The manager, a man named Mr. Henderson who looked like he'd been wearing the same gray suit since 1995, waddled out. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paperwork. He read the fraud alert. He read the clause about unauthorized transfer of marital assets. "Mrs. Chase," he said, adjusting his glasses, "this is highly irregular." "So is my husband stealing my inheritance?" I said coldly. "Freeze it. Now." He sighed, the heavy sigh of a man who just wants to go to lunch. He typed a command into his terminal. Click, clack, enter. "The account is frozen," he said. "No withdrawals, no transfers, no card usage. It will remain in this state pending a legal review or a court order to release it." "And the credit card?" "Suspended," he said. "The card is dead." I felt a physical wave of relief crash over me, so intense it almost made me dizzy. It was done. The tap was turned off. "Thank you," I said. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed. Text from Quincy. "Card declined at lunch. Must be a chip error. Can you transfer $500 to the checking? Need to cover the bill." I stared at the screen. He was at lunch, probably ordering the steak, probably laughing with his buddies. And suddenly the waiter had come back with that polite, pitying look. "I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined." I didn't reply. I just deleted the thread. I returned to the estate to find Garrison waiting in the study with my father. The mood in the room was grim but electric. "The bank is done," I announced, dropping my keys on the table. "Good," Garrison said, "because the law firm is done too." "What happened?" I asked, sinking into a chair. "I had a discreet breakfast with the senior partner, Malcolm," Alistair said, sipping his tea. "I didn't tell him what to do. I just showed him the police report regarding the gambling debts and the potential for malpractice suits if Quincy had been using client funds." "Did he use client funds?" I asked, horrified. "We don't know," Garrison said. "But the suspicion is enough. Law firms run on reputation. The moment they smell a liability, they amputate." "So he's fired?" "He's been asked to resign," Garrison corrected. "Effective immediately. They're framing it as a personal leave of absence for health reasons. It saves them a wrongful termination suit, and it saves him a sliver of dignity." "He doesn't deserve the dignity," I muttered. "It doesn't matter," Garrison said. "The result is the same. His income is zero. His access to the corporate credit card is zero. And the rumor mill, that's already churning. By tonight, everyone in Savannah will know Quincy Chase is out." I tried to imagine him. He was losing his money, his job, and his wife in the span of 24 hours. It felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Part of me, the part that had loved him, wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to watch. I had to make sure he didn't crawl out of the rubble. "There's one more thing," Garrison said. "The process server just dropped the divorce papers and the exclusive occupancy order at the house. He's home? He's home. And since you still have access to the security cameras—" Garrison slid his tablet toward me. I looked at the screen. The feed from the Ring doorbell showed the front porch. A man in a windbreaker handed Quincy a thick envelope. Quincy looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He took the envelope, confused. He opened it. I watched his face change. I expected rage. I expected him to tear the papers up. Instead, he laughed. It was a chilling, silent laugh. He looked up, straight at the camera. He knew I was watching. He knew I was the only one with access to the feed. He stepped closer to the lens, his face filling the screen, distorted by the fisheye effect. His eyes were bloodshot. "Elara," he said, his voice tinny through the speaker. "Honey, I know you're watching. This is cute. Really. The bank, the papers. It's a nice tantrum." My blood ran cold. He wasn't scared, he was condescending. "But you need to stop now," he continued, his voice dropping to that fake, soothing register. "You're hurting yourself. You're embarrassing your father. Just come home. We'll talk about this. I'll forgive you for the bank thing. I know you're not thinking straight. You're having one of your episodes." He reached out and patted the camera lens like he was patting a child on the head. "I'll be waiting," he said. "Dinner's at 7. He turned and walked back into the house, closing the door gently. I stared at the black screen. "He thinks he can wait me out," I whispered. "He thinks this is just a mood swing." "He's delusional," Alistair said. "Narcissistic collapse hasn't hit yet. He still thinks he's the smartest person in the room." "Then let's show him he's not," I said. "Garrison, call the locksmith. We're going over there." "Now. Right now. The occupancy order is effective immediately. He has 2 hours to vacate. If he's not gone, the sheriff removes him. I want to be there when the locks change." We arrived with a convoy. Me, Garrison, 2 private security guards my father employed, and a locksmith named Mike, who looked like he could bench press a truck. Quincy's car was in the driveway. The house was quiet. Garrison went to the door and rang the bell. I stood back by the SUV, my arms crossed, watching. Quincy opened the door. He was holding a drink. "Garrison," he smiled. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did Elara send her babysitter?" "You have been served with an order of exclusive occupancy," Garrison said, handing him another copy. "You have 30 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you refuse, the officers in the vehicle behind me will assist you." Quincy's smile faltered. He looked past Garrison, at me. "Elara!" he shouted. "Stop this! Come talk to me like an adult." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. "Sir." One of the security guards stepped forward. 30 minutes. Quincy looked at the guards. He looked at the locksmith who was already unpacking his drill. The reality finally seemed to pierce his armor. "Fine," he spat. "Fine. I'll grab a bag." "We brought bags," I said, speaking for the first time. I walked up the driveway and tossed a roll of black, heavy-duty garbage bags onto the porch. Quincy looked at the bags. Then he looked at me with pure venom. "Garbage bags?" he sneered. "For my suits?" "It seemed appropriate," I said calmly. "Since you treated our marriage like trash, I thought I'd return the favor." He glared at me, his face turning a mottled red. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge. The security guard took a step forward. Quincy flinched. He grabbed the bags and stormed inside. I stood on the porch while the locksmith started drilling out the core of the deadbolt. The sound of the drill whining against the metal was the most satisfying thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of my life being decoupled from his. Inside, I could hear him banging around, throwing things. I heard glass shatter. "He's breaking things," Garrison noted. "Let him," I said. "I'm selling the house anyway. He can break every plate in the kitchen. He can't break me." 30 minutes later, Quincy walked out carrying 2 bulging garbage bags over his shoulder, like Santa Claus in reverse. He looked ridiculous. The neighbors were watching from their windows. He stopped in front of me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You're nothing without me. You're a bored little rich girl playing business. You'll come crawling back in a month when you realize you can't function alone." I looked him in the eye. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel love. I felt bored. "Goodbye, Quincy," I said. "Leave the keys on the step." He threw his house keys into the bushes. A petty, childish final act. He got into his Audi, revved the engine aggressively, and peeled out of the driveway. I turned to the locksmith. "Is it done?" "New keys, ma'am," Mike said, handing me a shiny silver key. "Nobody gets in unless you say so." I took the key. It felt heavy, cool. I walked into the house. It was silent. The smell of his sandalwood cologne still lingered, but the air felt lighter. I walked to the kitchen. He had smashed a vase on the floor. I stepped over the shards. I opened the fridge. I took out a bottle of sparkling water. I sat at the island, alone in my empty house, and for the first time in 3 years, I took a deep breath that went all the way to the bottom of my lungs. The silence of the house didn't last long. It was broken less than 2 hours later, not by a phone call, but by the sound of a fist hammering against the front door. I checked the security feed on my phone. Quincy was back. He had abandoned the car in the middle of the street, the driver's side door left wide open like a gaping mouth. He was storming up the walkway, his face a mask of purple rage. He didn't look like the suave lawyer who had toasted me at the gala. He looked like a child whose toy had been snatched away. "Elara!" he screamed, pounding on the wood. "Open this door! My medication is in there. You can't keep me from my medication." I stood in the hallway, watching the door vibrate with each blow. Medication. Another lie. He took a multivitamin and an allergy pill during pollen season. He was trying to create a medical emergency to force entry. "I'm calling the police," I said through the door, my voice calm. "Call them," he roared. "I'll tell them you're having a psychotic break. I'll tell them you're dangerous." I dialed 911. "My estranged husband is attempting to break into my home. I have an exclusive occupancy order. He is violent." I waited. The pounding continued. He started kicking the door now. I could hear the wood splintering slightly around the frame. Panic tried to flare, the old instinct to open the door just to make him stop, to smooth things over, to manage his emotions. But I killed it. I wasn't his emotional manager anymore. I was his landlord, and he was evicted. Blue lights flashed through the transom window. 2 squad cars. I opened the door just as the officers walked up the path. Quincy spun around, his chest heaving. He immediately switched gears. The rage vanished, replaced by a frantic, worried performance. "Officers, thank God," he panted, pointing at me. "My wife, she's not well. She locked me out. She's off her meds. I just need to get inside to make sure she doesn't hurt herself." The older officer looked at Quincy, then at me. I stood in the doorway holding the court order Garrison had printed out. I didn't look crazy. I looked like a woman who was done. "Officer," I said, handing him the paper, "this is an order of exclusive occupancy signed by Judge Miller this afternoon. Mr. Chase has been served. He is trespassing." The officer read the paper. He looked at the kicked-in paint on the doorframe. He looked at Quincy. "Sir," the officer said, his hand resting on his belt, "you need to step away from the house." "But she's lying," Quincy sputtered, his charm failing to ignite. "She's hysterical. Look at her." "I'm looking at a court order, sir," the officer said, "and I'm looking at a disturbance of the peace. You can leave voluntarily or you can leave in the back of my car." Quincy looked at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. The narrative wasn't working. The crazy wife card had been declined. "Elara," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Please don't do this." "I didn't do this," I said, closing the door. "You did." 2 days later, I had to face the second circle of hell, Savannah Society. My mother insisted I attend the Garden Club luncheon. "If you hide," she said, "they'll think you're broken. If you show up, you own the story." I walked into the country club dining room wearing a red dress. Not emerald, red. The color of war. The room went quiet. I could feel the eyes, the whispers. "That's her, the poor thing. Did you hear about the gambling?" I walked to my mother's table. Before I could sit, Mrs. Gable, the woman who had sat next to me at the gala and laughed when Quincy made his toast, intercepted me. "Elara, darling," she gushed, grabbing my hands. "We have been so worried about you. I told Henry just yesterday, I said, that Quincy always gave me a bad feeling. I never trusted him. I looked at her. I remembered her laugh. It had been a high, tittering sound that cut through me like a knife. "Really, Martha?" I said, my voice sweet as poison tea. "Because I seem to remember you finding his toast quite amusing on Saturday." Her smile faltered. "Oh, well, I was just—" Nervous laughter, dear. We were all so shocked. Suddenly, I was surrounded. 4 other women descended, all eager to rewrite history. They claimed they had seen the signs. They claimed they had always whispered about his arrogance. They were rewriting their own complicity to align with the winner, and right now, holding the Winthrop name and the moral high ground, I was the winner. I listened to them. I nodded. I drank my iced tea, and I realized I didn't care. Their approval meant nothing. It was just currency, and the exchange rate was terrible. "It must be so hard," one of them whispered, touching my arm. "What will you do now?" "I'm going to eat my lunch," I said, "and then I'm going back to work." The real world intruded on Thursday. My cell phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. I answered, expecting the dry cleaner. "Is this Alara Chase?" A male voice, rough, unprofessional. "Who is this?" "This is regarding a debt owed by your husband. We've been trying to reach him. His phone is disconnected." "We are separated," I said. "His debts are his own." "Yeah, well, we have this number listed as a contact," the man said. The tone shifted. It wasn't a bank. It was a shark. "Mr. Chase owes a significant amount to private investors. We need to know where he is. Unless you want to settle the account?" My stomach tightened. "How much?" 25 large, plus interest. $25,000. To private investors. Loan sharks. Quincy hadn't just used apps. He had gone to the street. "I am not responsible for his debts," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I have a legal separation agreement that states that clearly. Lady, we don't care about paperwork. We want our money. Tell him to call us or we come to the house." "He doesn't live here," I said. "And if you come to this house, you will be met by armed private security and the police. However," I paused. I should have hung up, but I thought about the 3 years of emotional theft. I thought about the fragile speech. "If you want to find him," I said, "he is currently residing at 142 Maple Drive in Statesboro. It's his mother's house. He usually gets home around 6. There was a pause on the line. "Statesboro," the man said. "Thanks." Click. I put the phone down. I felt a cold shiver, but not of fear. It was the chill of absolute justice. I hadn't sent them. I had just forwarded the mail. I found my father in the greenhouse, orchids blooming around him in riots of purple and white. He was pruning a cattleya with surgical precision. "Garrison tells me the house is on the market," he said without looking up. "Listed this morning," I said. "I can't live there, Dad. It smells like lies." "Good," he snipped a dead leaf. "I have a proposition for you." He put down the shears and wiped his hands. "The Vice President of Strategic Development position is open. I fired Jenkins last week." "Dad," I sighed. "I'm an art historian. I can't run a division of an agricultural equipment company. People will say it's nepotism." "Let them say it," Alistair said. He walked over to a stack of files on the potting bench. "Do you remember the memo you sent me last year about the supply chain in Brazil? The one where you said the shipping routes didn't make sense?" "I was just looking at the maps," I shrugged. "It seemed inefficient to route through Miami when we could go direct to Savannah." "We implemented that change 6 months ago," he said. "It saved us $400,000 in fuel costs alone." He picked up another file. "And the suggestion about rebranding the tractor line for small-scale organic farmers? We launched that pilot program in Q2. Sales are up 15%. I stared at him. I was just talking. I was just making observations. "You have the instinct, Alara," he said, looking me in the eye. "You see patterns. You saw through Quincy's facade before any of us did. You just didn't trust yourself to act on it. But the data doesn't lie. You've been doing this job for free for years over Sunday dinner. I'm just offering to pay you for it." I looked at the files. My casual comments, my overthinking turned into profit. Quincy had told me I was useless. My father was showing me the receipts of my worth. "When do I start?" I asked. "Monday," he smiled. "Don't be late." 6 months later, I sat at the head of the conference table. The room was filled with men in gray suits, suppliers, distributors, stakeholders. We were discussing the new logistics contract. The representative from the shipping company, a man named Mr. Sterling, was trying to steamroll us on the price increase. "Look, sweetheart," he said, leaning back in his chair, a condescending smile plastered on his face. "I know these numbers look big to you, but fuel surcharges are complicated. You have to understand the market volatility." The room went quiet. He had used the word, sweetheart. Flashbacks hit me. Quincy at the podium. Fragile? Ornamental? I didn't shrink. I didn't smile. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my clasped hands. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice low and level, "I have analyzed your fuel surcharge index against the global crude prices for the last 3 quarters. Your surcharge has increased by 12% while global crude is down 4%. You aren't covering volatility. You are padding your margin." Sterling's smile vanished. He shifted in his seat. "Well, there are other factors." "There are," I interrupted, "and I've factored those in too, which is why we will not be accepting a 12% hike. We will accept 3%, or we will move our contract to Maersk by Friday. I have the proposal on my desk ready to sign." I held his gaze. I waited. The silence stretched, tense and heavy. 3%, Sterling muttered, looking down at his papers. "Excellent," I said, standing up. "Meeting adjourned." As I walked out of the room, I caught my father's eye at the other end of the table. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I walked out of the office building and into the crisp Savannah evening. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I checked my phone. No texts from Quincy. Blocked. Gone. I got into my new car, a convertible, bought with my own salary. I drove toward the river, toward the new condo I had closed on last week. It was modern, all glass and steel, with a view of the water, no dark corners, no hidden drawers. I stopped at a red light and looked at the car next to me. A couple was fighting. The man was yelling, gesturing wildly. The woman was staring out the window, looking small, looking tired. I wanted to roll down my window. I wanted to tell her. It gets better. The moment you stop being afraid of the explosion is the moment you survive it. The light turned green. I drove on. I wasn't Alara the wife anymore. I wasn't Alara the victim. I was just Alara. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Update, 3 months later. So here is the autopsy report of a marriage that should have ended years ago. The divorce was finalized in record time. Quincy didn't contest it. He couldn't. He didn't have the money for a lawyer, and no one in town would take his case pro bono after the ethics board released their findings. He was disbarred in the state of Georgia for misappropriation of funds and conduct unbecoming. He's still living with his mother in Statesboro. I heard through the grapevine, my mother's hairstylist, the true source of all intelligence, that he's working at a big-box sporting goods store, selling sneakers to teenagers. Apparently, the commission is terrible. The gambling debts caught up with him. He's on a payment plan that will essentially keep him in poverty until he's 70. The loan sharks didn't break his legs, but they broke his spirit. He looks 10 years older in the photos I definitely don't look at anymore. As for me, I sold the house in Ardsley Park. I burned the red dress. I kept the job. I'm dating again. Or I'm thinking about it. A nice architect asked me out for coffee. He drives a Honda. He splits the bill. He asked me what I think about structural integrity. I haven't said yes yet. I'm taking my time. Because the most important relationship I'm building right now is the one with myself. And let me tell you, she's high maintenance, but she's worth every penny. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here,